All right, code not clicks. Some people liked my joke. I don't know about everyone, but I liked it, so that's why it's there. Objective obviously not being to do everything in code, and actually it should be all written down and not actual code, right? So it should be speaking to your Salesforce instance is the objective of this thing. Graham, I don't know, you said something about speaking to it, so maybe you want to speak to that. But yeah, I think that's the objective, is to make your life easier, faster with the stuff that usually takes a lot of clicks. I would say that's how I look at this.
Oh yeah, if you don't watch the clock too much, you'll know that I'm a rambler. So I just kind of I speak voice to text all my thoughts, and AI helps translate that into working code. Sometimes not working code, but then you just speak to it more, and eventually it works.
Just end up with a lot of lines to fix the previous mistake in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So I mean, talked about intro, but really, just this came up because some people on a special group of Salesforce users asked me how I was using VS Code to do Salesforce configuration, create code. And so I put a session together that was initially going to be internal only, but then I decided to make this group bigger so we could have even more fun and more pressure on a random Wednesday morning. So that's going to be the objective here. So simply have fun, learn something, review the tools that I do use. So a main stack that we're going to use, let's call it a stack, is going to be VS Code. And obviously there's alternatives there. You can use different IDEs if you want, but I mainly use VS Code. And then supporting tools are going to be, I'll talk about Cline, Claude Code, and Salesforce MCP as well, the integration that allows you to deploy and create metadata from Visual Studio Code, but allow you to do a lot of things, query data. This was previously a similar way to work with Salesforce with those tools. Previously was the Salesforce CLI, but with the MCP, it seems to be so far working slightly better than what the CLI allowed. I don't know, Graham, if you've made the move to the MCP yet, or what your thoughts are, but it feels like it's slightly smoother and I get less errors, I think.
Yeah, a little bit smoother. I think there's something to be said about the amount of context that gets taken up when using some of these MCP servers, but it feels like it more reliably calls what you want it to call. So that helps.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the tools, then we'll talk about, just go through a couple of live examples. So we'll hop into VS Code and see what that looks like. And then Q&A is at the end, but really feel free to ask questions at any point in there. And let me know if something comes up. Should probably have done an intro slide, but if you signed up, you kind of know who I am. Jean-Michel Tremblay, or JM for short, usually. Been doing quote to cash for 9+ years. I'm a managing principal at Elysian. Got a couple other partners here as well. John Garvins, Graham. If anyone wants to intro themselves, actually, I'll let you go ahead and do that. And if not, we'll keep going. Leave you a second to answer that question.
Oh yeah, John Garvins Consulting. I started as an admin, moved to the dark side, became a consultant, taught CPQ, and I'm mostly known as a CPQ guy throughout the ecosystem, but now all of us are learning the new one. And but I'm also new to this AI thing. I have yet to use any of these tools, really. So I'm looking forward to learning from Jean-Michel.
And hey there, everyone. Seeing a lot of names that I'm familiar with, but never actually talked to you. So hello, I'm Graham. I work with Slalom right now. I'm a dev by education. I was thrown into CPQ right off the bat. Been in CPQ and quote to cash for the past 4 years or so, and working on Revenue Cloud like everyone else right now. Been pretty deep on the AI tooling stuff since it came out, and happy to talk and share some thoughts today.
Thanks, Graham. Anyone else? Floor is yours.
Sure. I'm Cici Chidarsky with CLD Partners. I'm a solution architect here. I'm focusing on quote to cash, mainly for service organizations. Been doing that for more than what I should say in public. Happy to be here, and thank you for putting this together.
Thanks. And I should preface this. We talked about a lot about Revenue Cloud just now, but this applies to anything Salesforce, right? You don't have to be working on Revenue Cloud for this to apply. In fact, I would say Revenue Cloud adds some complexities there that we probably won't get to today. But trying to get some of that stuff working, like context services and updating field mappings in there using AI, but I can't say that I was able to as of yet. FAQ, we kind of talked about this, but you don't need to be a dev. Already have talked about this. Will this replace me? I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I have days where I'm scared. Sometimes I have days where I'm thinking it won't. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I think right now the objective is to do less of the boring stuff or do it quicker anyway and do more of the fun stuff. Why not just stick to clicks? It's faster, hopefully, if you start to use this. If you don't want to do any coding, you don't have to do any coding, right? Objective is not necessarily to do Apex and Lightning Web Components, although it is entirely possible to go that far, but we can, we can use that stack to simply create fields, create objects, create sample data, whatever it is, right? Or create scripts to assign permission sets is a thing that I've done also, and we can talk about it further. Setup, we'll talk about the tools, and overall objective, I've already said, is to have fun, so let's get going. IDE is going to be, again, VS Code. Quickly touched on this, but it's free. It integrates to Salesforce. There's a bunch of Salesforce extensions that you can use. So that's the one I use. Feel free to use something else. I'm not going to get into a fight with you about which one is your preferred IDE. AI tools, again, we'll talk about, I'd say, two main tools here. Obviously, again, there's a lot more available. I was a big Cline user because it's open source and it can use any LLM as long as you have an API key for the large language model that you want to use. Graham made me feel bad about not trying Claude Code, so I've been trying that for the last couple of weeks. Sad to report that it works pretty well, and maybe Graham was right. But I still do like that Cline is open source, and I can pivot to other models if I don't want to be stuck in the Anthropic ecosystem. So I will say that Cline still works very well and is a solid alternative. Salesforce MCP, as I said, fairly new, but allows you to connect to your Salesforce org and easily create, update objects, field, permission sets, deploy metadata, query data from your environment. So very fun tool to use, I've found so far. And also, as I said, a bunch of Salesforce extensions are available for VS Code that will help your work. So I have a Salesforce org open somewhere. There we go. I have this Salesforce environment. It's a scratch org, not much to report in there. It has Revenue Cloud configured. I already did a bunch of stuff with VS Code in there, but that's the environment we'll be working out of. This is Visual Studio Code. It might be the first time, or maybe it's not the first time you see this, but that's what it looks like in dark mode anyway. I'm sure there's a light mode somewhere, but I like my eyes, so it's dark. I have two windows open. Main window is already connected to my Salesforce environment. On the right-hand side, we can see the Explorer, which is already, again, connected to my Salesforce environment. We see the main folder that's going to be relevant for us is the Force app folder here, which lists all the objects that or not objects, but all the metadata that I've decided to retrieve from my environment. So we can see Apex classes, or if we had any Visual Force pages. We can see our flows as well, so we can retrieve and we can see flows in our environment. So this is what a flow looks like in the backend, right? So we're all used to seeing our visual interface for flows, but this is what's happening in the background. So we see all the different boxes that we've got in our interface are on there. We can see the name, what's happening, the choices. And what's fun here is that we're going to be able to modify those flows or create net new flows from Visual Studio without going in and clicking. So can do a mix of clicks and code, right? So I'm here talking to Claude Code, to Cline, whatever tool you're using, and you say, hey, I want to create a flow that does X, Y, Z. I've had a fair amount of success with, I haven't tried super complex flows to be clear, but I have a fair amount of success with flows like an on order creation. I need to set the billing and shipping address to the billing and shipping address from the related account, right? And that has worked pretty well and pretty successfully on every try. Those types of things that, and it would take a couple minutes to build. in the interface. I like working out of this. I feel like it's a lot more efficient because I just tell it what I want. It creates it. I test it. And then if I need to go any further, well, the flow is still there. I can still go in my Salesforce environment and modify it. And we can see how that we create one afterwards. Back to our Explorer on the right. We have a lot more, right? Global value sets, so just global pick lists. Lightning Web Components, if you've got any, are going to be listed. As I said earlier, objects, so I can either look at current objects if I pull them from my environment or create net new objects. And this is also where I'm going to be able to create more fields. Again, I don't actually need to click through any of this. I'm going to be doing this by talking to Cline or Claude. And finally, objects permission sets is the other interesting one. I think clicking through and adding permissions to permission sets is always painful to me anyway. So I like being able to simply tell it, create a field and also make sure you update the system admin permission set as soon as possible. Graham, when he introduced me to Claude Code, talked about something important that we'll get to, sub-agents. And I do have one sub-agent that actually handles creating permission set every time I ask Claude Code to create a new field or object. So you can automate, beyond what we're going to talk about there. We probably won't have enough time to talk through this. But there's a lot of possibilities. So quick intro to what that looks like in Visual Studio Code for anyone that's not familiar. I hope that's enough. We'll stop there for now, but if there's any questions, please raise your hand and ask away. So again, main window, then the second window that I've got open as the two tools that we talked about. Yeah, go ahead.
So essentially what we're doing with Visual Studio Code, to make sure I understand, is we're assembling the XML file that's running in the background. And the flow is essentially just a visual representation of that XML file. So you could build it or update it either way. Salesforce doesn't care. It's just whatever's most efficient and useful for you. And that's what we're getting into today.
Yeah, and let's look at this quickly. It's a good question. That's a flow that I created with Claude, right? So I wanted, in the example I just talked about, right? So I want to set order address and the billing contact from the related account on order creation. So I simply ask Claude to get that done. And we can see here assign order fields, right? So we see the assignment of values and we see the list of values that are being assigned. And if there's an error, it's going to show an error, right? So it's fairly long. It's a fairly long flow. And if we jump into Salesforce, let's see. And to your point, the flow screen, what it does is it shows you how it interprets the XML file, right? Like a website is like HTML, but you see a visual, you don't see code, right? You see the visual portion.
The WYSIWYG editor, and it's a flow is like WYSIWYG editor for the underlying HTML.
Yeah. So set quote addresses from account. Well, might not be the same one, but similar functionality. All right, so this one I created with Claude again, right? So it's first check, do I have an account on my quote? Yes. And get account details. But really, all this is a visual representation of this one actually, set quote addresses from account, right? So we have the XML file. And this simply matches one-to-one. It's a different way to look at it. And obviously, because it's XML, then it's easy enough for our LLM to read, to look at, and modify, right? I saw a lot of posts recently about using ChatGPT agent, but you ask for the simplest modification, and I've tried it, and it takes 25 minutes if it works, because it doesn't know where to click. Whereas if you do it in here, it takes a minute, and it works right away. So I've had much more success with this way.
And, real quick addition, I think what's really cool here is to your point, John, like it's whichever way you feel you want to do, like make an update to an existing flow, you can go in and modify the flow yourself, or you can generate it this way. If you generate it this way and you work with it this way, you can also have your, JM kind of pointed to it, like sub agents or hooks kind of built into your system prompts for Claude Code. So that it's checking and making sure it's following certain best practices that you yourself lay out. Like we all have different standards or formats for how we do things. I'm sure none of us ever miss a error check or an error fault. We never miss that. But you can have that built into your rules so that it builds that for you every time. And that's just one extra thing you don't have to worry about because it's going to handle it every time automatically for you anytime you tell it to update or create a flow. So like, simple things like that, being able to build in rules can help enforce things that you should be doing, but maybe we forget or we're a little bit lazy sometimes.
Like writing test classes for Apex code?
Like writing test classes, exactly.
Good thing we all do 100% test coverage.
Oh, and then writing test classes for Revenue Cloud becomes a lot more fun when you have to deal with the namespaces also. So keep that in mind. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick follow-up question on that, though. If, for example, if in the org we have like some specific naming conventions, we always want to name the variables in a certain way or the decisions in a certain way, would you put that in like that sub-agent that you were talking about?
Yeah, it'd either
yes.
be in.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah. They're in the different agent platforms like Claude Code or Cline have different ways of handling like a system prompt, but you could have things in like your Claude.md or system prompt to enforce that. You could have them built into sub-agents. You could have it built into hooks. There's a lot of different ways depending on how and when you want that rule to be like called. But yeah.
Yeah, so I just typed in elp in Claude Code. Let's start there, right? So elp is obviously the simplest command. It shows me, I hope it's large enough for everyone. I have a large screen, but I tried to zoom in. I hope it's enough for everyone, but again, raise your hand if it's not. Simply typed in elp here, and it shows me a list of available commands, right? Obviously, you can simply talk, but if you want to go further, here are the commands. And a couple ones we'll highlight. Agent is going to be how you configure sub-agents. Again, let's see if we can get there, but that's how you would call it. And then edit code memory files is, I would say, what you're talking about now, CC, right? So it's if I type in, if I hit enter and let's do memory, you've got a couple different memory files available. So you can have project specific memory. You can have one that's get ignored, and then you can have user memory that's going to apply to all your projects, right? So depending on what it is, if you want something that's project specific, right, you're working in an org that has Financial Force, right, it's going to be relevant, and maybe you want a reference to the ELP documents from Financial Force in there, right? Maybe that's going to be project specific, you're going to put it in there. But user memory would be, we work with Salesforce, current API version is going to be 65 now, and obviously you want to go as specific as you can in there, I would say, and then even possibly when to use sub-agents. But yes, you can always define how you want it to work, and if you've got any specific naming convention, that's where you would define that.
That's great to know, especially like the project memory. I can see that like when we engage with some customers that have their own framework, their own rules, things that we gotta respect. Just for them, like we'll use that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, no worries. So we can start simple. Let's create a field, perhaps, right? And if you want to see anything specific, please, again, raise your hand, let me know. All right, create a field on the account object. And let's say it's a checkbox, and name is, let's call it J Garvins is the checkbox name. All right. All right, you're famous, John.
This is how we're going to assign users to records, checkbox fields.
That's how I manage security on my projects. Typically, I create a checkbox per user, and if it's checked, that's how you get access. All right, so that's created, but not actually deployed at this point. It simply created it. Again, that's probably something that should be in my memory that I should tell it to always deploy if I want to, or not always deploy if I don't want to. But then I can also tell it to deploy, which is when it should be using the MCP at this point. I actually used DX now, not the MCP, which is probably not what it might be fine. So I tell it that it actually did use the MCP. Never mind. So it is. I want to tell it that it can always do it. So when it does more sensitive actions, it's going to prompt you to ask, "Can I do that? Can I do this? Can I not do this?" And now it has been successfully deployed. And then you can tell it that it's okay for now or it's okay forever. Obviously, it's only one field. I would probably argue that this was quicker than doing it in the interface because it's like 6 clicks in the interface. But now that's a simple example, right? I only did one. The other day, I had an XML file with 75 fields for a complex configuration that I did in Revenue Cloud. I just fed the XML file till, it was also all pickless with different pickless values. So that complex XML file just fed that file and it created 75 fields in the same amount of time it just took to create that one field. So I think there are a lot, again, of efficiencies to be gained. Good validation might be to see if it actually did create it and did deploy it. Hopefully it did.
Well, especially since when we think about context definitions and the mappings and all this other stuff, we want to be consistent throughout the object model, the data model with what we're creating and where, and uploading an XML file would be much faster than trying to remember to manually create each field, which is definitely an intern task where somebody's going to forget something and then you got to double check. So copy paste pivot is likely a better way to go.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm trying to validate something and instead Chrome decided to shut down, so that was fun. But the field was created. Go back in there. Account, what is this? Data Cloud related list. But there we go. Jay Garvin's is here, deployed in our environment, so that's what we wanted. Yeah, it quit unexpectedly, I know, okay. All right, so let's go back in VS Code. So that was our first simple example. As you're working with those large language models, I would say one thing that's important is that if you're talking in the same, speaking to it in the same discussion over and over, as the context grows, it will get not as good, I would say. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, right? There are limits, and Anthropic is coming out with a new version that has longer context capabilities, but I would say generally keep in mind that as you're writing more, right? If you're doing something complex and creating something and asking it to rework, at some point, I would say 2 things that I take as an habit is get it to create like a README file of what you're building, right? If it's complex, and what are the instructions, why you're building this, how it should work, and what the functionality is. And then at some point in time, what you want to do is, Travis, you can go ahead in a second, but you're going to want to probably clear your discussion and restart from the top. And if you want to restart working on the same thing, then just point it to your README file that explains what it should do and say, okay, I need it to modify it to do XYZ now. So it has context, but you're not burning through a million tokens of context, where that's really where stuff can get scrambled if it gets overly complex. Travis?
Yeah, thanks. As someone that's new to, I guess, just working with these AI tools from a development standpoint in general, how do you go about managing, I guess, that the context has become too large, or that it's starting to degrade at a certain point? Like, is that just something you're noticing as the responses are getting less credible? I mean, I've heard the topic mentioned in like ChatGPT is like long conversations go, they start to kind of fall apart, but that's like the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's gotten a lot better, to be fair. It's gotten a lot better, but I think what happens when you're doing complex Apex or Lightning Web Component, sometimes, you get a bug, for example, right? And you'll see it start to spin its wheel and say, okay, we'll try that, still doesn't work. We'll try that, still doesn't work. And at some point, I don't know, it seems to get confused, right? Probably like a human would, right? And you gotta, a human would take a break and do something else. There's a couple ways that I handle this. Typically, first restarting with a clean context and maybe restarting from scratch. I'm working on Apex class XYZ. I've got an issue where it's doing this when it should do that, or we're getting an error. Review the code and tell me where that might be coming from. So that's one option. The other larger option is sometimes you have to switch models. That's the reality. Sometimes you'll have to take your Apex class that you've been working with Claude, and you're going to pivot to Gemini, because I have it through work, right? And I'm going to feed it to Gemini and say, here's the issue that I have. And sometimes Gemini will find the bug that Claude couldn't for whatever reason, right? Training data. I don't know what the technical reason is behind the scenes, but sometimes you just using a different model helps with those kinds of issues.
Okay, so it sounds like it's mostly just trial and error until like you find something that seems to work on the topic that you're working on, or it seems to have enough background or history in order to execute well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you can so like the workflow I'm using at this point, because that is the number one problem, is the context becomes oversaturated, it gets lost, it goes in circles, it's useless. I essentially find if it is missing at its first big shot at a task, I'm completely resetting every single time. But like the workflow to make that work is you give it a spec file up front. So I'm not individually typing my prompt of what all I want done and the full context every single time. I'm passing over a spec sheet, which is either a user story or set of user stories combined with all the details it would need. And that sort of is its prompt. Outside of that, all I'm doing is giving it maybe some relevant classes to like go look at. So like your goal is to curate the perfect context needed so that it can do its job well. And if it completely messes up, then all that means is you completely restart and you clarify where it went wrong or additional context to help it on the next go around in that spec file.
So are we essentially building the world's longest long tail search engine search? And the more specific and precise I can be with what precisely I want, the better my result's going to be.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, people building those tools would probably be angry at that take, but I think for our use as, non-AI researchers, I think that's accurate.
It's kind of like asking a client for a business requirement. The more specific and precise they can be with what they ask for, the better design we will give them.
Exactly. And the great part is, for those updates, if it completely whiffs, I mean, you can just give it a quick like, hey, this is where you went wrong, and then go tell it to go update those spec files or its plan file for you, so that you can go review and it has the full context of everything it did with all the code. It can get into more detail than you can quicker. You just review the change it made, then you completely reset and send it off to do it again.
Makes sense. Thank you, guys.
All right. What do we want to see it do next? John, I feel like you've got ideas that you've got planned there. If not, I'll take the lead, but if you've got an idea, let me know.
I do actually. I was just wondering in my head. Okay, I decided, just kidding. I don't want that Garvin's field. I decided I'm going to use the owner ID because that's maybe a better practice. I got my hand slapped in a Reddit forum for creating all these checkbox fields and record sharing rules. So can I delete said field from here as well? I assume so. Or is that something I have to do in the UI?
I don't know the answer, but give it a try. Why not?
There
I don't delete fields because, to Drew's point earlier, I don't make mistakes. But if I did,
have to make a mistake first. But let's assume for a moment. We'll pretend. Can this speak to context definitions and the mappings and stuff, or is that? I imagine that's complex enough that would need to be a UI thing.
Theoretically, it can, because it's metadata, right?
Right.
It's there. It exists. The problem I've seen so far is the context is a gigantic file. So you kind of hit the limit pretty quickly on this.
Exactly. Yeah, like even procedures. I have a procedure pulled up from an org right now, and it's 16,000 lines of XML. And so technically, the stuff's there so that you can read it and make changes. But trying to load 16,000 lines, we run into issues. Jim and I might be able to handle it.
What's a practical limitation then? 1,000 lines, 100 lines? Where does it start to bunk?
So all the models are like all the companies, they speak in terms of tokens. I don't have like an exact measure in my head for lines of XML to tokens, but you'd probably have to do a token calculator. Things start pretty consistently people start noticing degradation around 100K tokens. So even for Gemini, which can handle up to 1 million, they're getting 95% memory context retrieval at 100K. Once they hit 200K, it's down to 70%. So you want to be pretty tight with your context.
And then this speaks to my ignorance, can I manipulate data with VS Code and these tools? Because a lot of for example, in Revenue Cloud, attribution and products and components and stuff, can I make those with this also?
I think it would actually be great to, I've been too stuck in the Revenue Cloud world now, but I think it would be amazing to work in CPQ, creating price rules. If you gave it access to all the field in your pick list, I mean, it has access to all of this, but if you gave it some good instructions and how to handle price rules and product rules, I think it would be amazing at creating them and managing them. Yeah.
Or even just digesting the price rules that I have, because I need to know.
Yes.
For cutting over to Revenue Cloud.
Yeah, for sure.
What are the price rules I have? What's the QCP doing? How can I then, and that'll help me convert into, okay, well, because of that, I need to create these mappings and the context definitions and all this other stuff in the Revenue Cloud side. So that could probably facilitate a massive drop in savings in time on our future migration projects, which are going to be horrible, painful experiences for everyone involved. But we're gonna learn a lot.
It would probably do very well at auditing like price rules if you gave it the instructions and what you want as the outcome. I'm sure it would. I actually did delete the field. It kind of spun around for a while, but it ended up deleting the field. See, it's gone.
Nice.
John Garvin's is gone.
I've disappeared from the earth.
You disappeared. I actually did create test data because that was a demo environment. I needed demo accounts just to test. So just, so it can create data as well as metadata, to your point. Obviously, creating accounts is a simple example, but same goes for any kind of structure. I actually created bundles through this as well. So I gave it all the instructions for I created a Markdown
Make sure you
file.
populate the billing and shipping addresses because we want to work on order splits based on location.
Billing, shipping, address.
Am I finally going to get these API tools?
All in the
I can't
Pacific
be a public
Northwest.
curmudgeon forever. Eventually, I'm going to have to relent and get this stuff. I still haven't created a ChatGPT account or any other account other than Gemini, which comes with my Google Workspace.
Well, here you are, at least learning. So I created a Markdown file that has all the instructions of what the data structure is for Revenue Cloud bundles, right? So product and product component group and product components and product selling models, price book entries, and all the fields that are required. I created that file, and now when I need to create bundles, I also don't create them in the interface as much as I can. I just tell it, follow the instructions in this. Here are the bundles that I need. And obviously, if you had a structured CSV, I mean, that's for demos, right? But if you had a structured CSV file for a project, you get the customer to fill it in, and then you just load that in. That should become fairly easy. Let's see, it's importing the accounts, right? It showed us all the accounts I would create. Pike Place. Told it to focus on Pacific Northwest for the billing and shipping address. The accounts are created. If we up back into Salesforce, let's see what we've got. Yeah, there you go. Cascade Coffee Roasters. Did your dog celebrate, John? How amazing this was?
I think we got a FedEx or UPS guy down the street. She loves the UPS guy because he's got treats. She hates any mail person from the Postal Service, and FedEx is hit or miss.
Cece, got a question?
A quick question. So you mentioned you put together a file with the bundle definition and all that. Do you save that file locally, and then how do you consume that file? Like, how do you tell Claude to use it?
Yeah, so usually once it's in obviously I've got a bunch that are directly in right? So it just created a CSV file itself actually to load, right? So before loading it, it created that file with all the account data, and then it used that data to load into Salesforce. And I've got, I don't know, folder somewhere with a bunch of data. But if you create them on your computer, they can either be in your project. So when you're creating a new, I have a million projects open in Visual Studio Code at any point in time, but that's one specific project that has all its files. So you could create the files and add them to your folder structure directly in that file. And then when you're, as I'm talking to in here, right, I could say, let's clear and restart to make this more obvious. But if I start from the top and I would say, okay, so my file here that it just created, right? You can right click. I mean, you can tell it what the file name is, but usually my workflow is I'll right click and copy the path or relative path to that specific file. And then as you're talking through this, even if it's not in that folder, it might ask you to read that file if it has access, if it's outside of the project files. But I need to load the accounts in this file. Right now, they'll already exist, so I might stop it, but you can simply tell it where the files are located, and it can read through them. I'm just going to stop it so we don't create a bunch of duplicates. All right. Got a fairly technical question. Feels like that might actually be a question for Anthropic themselves and not me, but obviously security concerns. I mean, obviously, I think there are options also. John, you're muted, but I think beyond that, there's some. I think it's a valid concern first that I share.
One of my biggest concerns with all of this stuff is how much proprietary code, proprietary data is being put into these models without the consent of the organization overall, and what happens when there's a data breach. It'll happen at some point.
It's a definitely a fair concern, and then I would say the alternative that I'm considering is if you've got, and now some Macs can do it pretty well, but if you want GPUs, I don't know, Graham was talking about this the other day so OpenAI released a couple open source models that apparently work pretty well. I have not tested them, but all of what I'm doing now could be done on a open source model that's running locally on your computer if you wanted to. And that's probably where you would want to use something like Cline, because obviously Claude Code is pretty much locked in with Anthropic and their LLMs that run in the cloud, right? But if you use Cline, again, I talked about this quickly, but maybe quick segment on Cline. And what I like about it is Cline runs locally, is open source, doesn't send anything to the cloud. Obviously, then the tool itself, right? Not the code that you're building in it, because you are ultimately calling an endpoint from all those providers. But one thing that Cline can do is it can leverage local models if you had one. So if you have a model that's running locally on your computer because you've got a computer that's fast enough, or maybe, you work for a company that has its own models running locally, right? Because that's one of the selling points. We use AI, but it's all running locally, so it's all stuck in our stuff, right? Whatever the answer is, right? Ultimately, we all also use Google Drive and Microsoft 365 that are probably as, exposed to breaches as any of those tools are, if we're also honest there. So I think that's simply the reality of where we live. But if you want to be extra, go beyond that, I think you could use one of those local models and have some similar successes in using those.
Are we gonna go full circle and go back to on-prem software owned and hosted by the company itself for the purpose of keeping information internal? That would be
I think that's already happening, with large language models and open source model. I think that's already, Graham pointed out that there are options where it's hosted and apparently more secure. Is that true or not? It's still running in the cloud, right? And we've saw, everyone gets breached, right? Even Salesforce more recently, unfortunately, right? So, but if you want to be extra secure, and I know some, law firms and some people in the alt sector as well, they use models that are running locally. So that's definitely an option, right? So you're not stuck with what's available. And I think, I hope there's going to be more open source models. I think we all win if there are more open source models.
Yeah.
Can we turn all of what we've just done into a technical design document? Because if anybody who's been on a project, the first things that get cut are documentation and training. So can we just say, hey, I made all this stuff, or even stuff not made with this tool? I want you to go and find those price rules in Salesforce CPQ. I want you to write that in a human-friendly document where my business user can read it and say, oh, I know what's going on here. I don't know
so
how
let's
any of this
do.
works.
I mean, yes, and I actually have a sub agent that should be doing this. I haven't actually seen it trigger. But so there might be something wrong in that specific project. But I have a sub agent where the task of the sub agent is every time I create something new, is to create some documentation on it. But if you wanted to specifically call out some stuff, right, retrieve some stuff, you could tell it retrieve that data. But I've got this flow and this flow, right? So let's do those two flows, and we say, what do you want to do? I need detailed documentation on those two flows for approval by the business, right? Something like this. Obviously, you would gain on being probably more specific on what you exactly want from this. That's fairly vague what I just wrote down, right? So I'll get what I get. But the more, again, Graham, we all spoke about this, but the more specific you are with exactly what you want, the better it will be at giving you what you want out of this. So it should give us business documentation. Obviously, it's only two flows, but whatever you've got, right? Apex, if you wanted to query price rules and tell it what it does, or ask it what it's doing, I think those are all valid use cases. I talked about OpenAI agent earlier. I think a fun use case for that one that actually controls a computer and gets to click through your interface for the same audit purposes would be to actually log into your environment and get a list of test cases and actually go and create quotes and test that your price rules are firing when they should be firing. Sorry, side note, but I tried to do something similar the other day. It worked well enough when I did. There you go. So it created a new file, flow business documentation. There you go. Now you can get approval for all your changes.
And I suppose those hashes, those are what?
It's a Markdown document.
Tags. Yeah. This would be great for auditing what the hell's in an org.
Mm-hmm.
Like new client, who this? What the hell do you have going on in here? Please document these 792 fields on the account object that are all custom. What do they do? Deconstruct the formulas. Tell me what those formulas are doing and referencing on other objects. That'd be a huge time save as well.
Yeah, I think it's comparable for the amount of time we're saving on creating things. We might be saving more time even on the discovery side of things to figure out how the hell did we get here in the first place? What's going on here? Or even onboarding devs in the middle of a project. Now they just have a chatbot. They can go ask questions about the org information, and we already have some metadata we can pass over. And yeah, it's really helpful.
Especially for the metadata, AI is going to be incredibly helpful because it's the most complete and consistent set of data that we have in the system. And even something like quote to cash process, you think about all the data points that are populated on quotes and quote lines and orders and order products and such. If I want a better understanding of my business, starting with quote to cash as an introductory point for AI tools is probably a good place to go because it's your most complete data set.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been thinking about this for a while, but I haven't had the chance to actually do it. But yeah, if you take ownership of an org that has CPQ, right, just if you have a good document, tell it to retrieve all the price rules and, add documentation around it, and then product rules, documentation, and do they have any flows on quote lines? Maybe they do. Some people do that.
And
I tell them not to, but
process
they still do it.
And workflow field updates because they bought the tool back in 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. So when it comes to code, like if you are writing a piece of code or something like that, would you do it there in the same Claude Code tab, or you are working on your class and then you can kind of call Claude from there?
Well, I'm not a dev enough to say that I would write my own class before asking it to, so I'll be transparent there. I would ask it to go from scratch, based on my requirements. So yes, I would start from nothing. I don't know. Let's do we have contacts on? I think we have contacts somewhere in there. No list views. Great. All right, let's create. Probably could do this with Cloud, creating a list view. Anyway, all right, so we have some contacts. Let's do, I need. All right, you should use a related list for this, to be clear, unless you have a very good reason. I don't think that's a good use case, but I want something simple that's going to be turned around quickly. And what I think where Cloud works well compared to other tools, it should typically create a list of tasks that needs to go through, right? I need to create an Apex class to retrieve contacts, then I need to create the Lightning Web Component, then I need to deploy, that sort of thing. So you see it's going through this. It's looking for anything that might be related to what we're doing right now. I'm not sure why it read something with billing milestones, but now so it created our HTML file for our Lightning Web Component first. So we should see those files start to pop up on the right-hand side. If we go to Lightning Web Components, contacts display, right? So it created our files for our Lightning Web Component. It's probably something that you could have done without Apex if you wanted to, but it also created a class. Again, something where you can be specific depending on what you actually wanted to do. You see, so it's highlighted in green here because it is, that's a sub-agent. That's my permission manager sub-agent, and it triggered because we created something new. So it's going to go in and update the system admin permission set to make sure it's got access to that new Apex class that we just created.
This is going to be nice too, because by default, currently in the UI, we still update profiles with field level security, but with the deprecation of profiles on the horizon, making permission sets for everything and having the agent do that for me is going to save a lot of clicks.
Yeah, and in fact, that sub-agent is configured to do, so the instructions are, you need to create a system admin permission set and not profile, right? So, and if it already exists, simply update that one. So if I was in a new environment that didn't have it, it would first create the permission set called system admin, and then it wouldn't be assigned to me, or maybe I did also instruct it to assign it to the running user. But if I haven't, then you can tell it to also assign it to specific people. And we can look at that. We all know, or at least the people working with Revenue Cloud know, that there's a lot of permission sets, or some permission sets involved in Revenue Cloud.
So
just a couple.
Small handful.
I was tired of doing it manually, so I ended up creating a script in VS Code that I can simply run from the terminal. And when I say I created, Claude Code created for me a script that verifies that the permission sets exist and then assigns it to whichever user you tell it to assign it to.
And that's such a powerful thing. The fact that, there's so much stuff you can do just through the CLI that previously, was only the realm of developers and then experienced developers at that to do it well.
I don't know why. What happened?
Feels like I'm going back to my Linux experimentation days where I was doing the sudo terminal whatever stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know why it went crazy there. Something happened when I tried to deploy permissions, updates to permission sets. Not going to figure out why just now, but it started to also assign other things in there, I think. So now it's deploying the class, and the Lightning Web Component is what it's doing. Again, calling the Salesforce MCP, you can see what it's doing. You can always press escape if you need it to be stopped, and then it tells you everything that it did, right? So it created a Lightning Web Component, an Apex controller. It deployed it. It tells you what it does. Obviously, it was a very vague requirement, right? But if we go to let's go maybe to an account that we know as a contact. So let's go to this one. we can edit our page and we should see our new component available there. Accounts, contacts, display. Let's do this. There we go.
Oh.
Activating pages. All right.
Yes.
Our new component is on there, and there it is. We've got our new Lightning Web component popped up on there. Does it work? It does let me collect through contacts, so. Can I also?
So I have a more commercial question. How much did all this work cost us right now? Because from what I understand, there's a big usage component to all of these models. You pay a subscription, you get a certain amount of usage.
Yeah.
What did this theoretically cost us to do right now? 50 cents, 10 cents, $1?
I used to work with API keys in Cline, where you actually, in Cline, what happens is I tell it, let's see, I'll just copy the path for this. I'll go to Cline and I'll, nothing happens. Why? I haven't used it in a while, as we can all see now. Let's see if it works. All right, there we go. So we'll actually see when you're using the API, and am I connected to Claude Code in this one as well? Maybe I am. If I was using an API key, I would actually see the, oh, well, there it is. See the cost going up there as it's reading through and as the context. And you actually see, right? We've been talking about context and tokens so far. What Cline does very well is it shows you the amount of context that you're working through, and you can see everything that it's doing, very similar to what Claude Code was doing, right?
Yeah.
So it's showing you everything that it does, every request, what it costs exactly as it's going through, right? So we're up to 13 cents, and we're up to, why does this keep opening up?
So I guess
it's writing the file. That's what it's doing.
The cost
so you can see it writing the
like
file.
It's worth the 13 cents to save all the time we just saved, especially when the billable hour is 250 or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. So you see what it's going through, and you can see, you can see context going up. Fun thing in Cline is you can tell it to restart the context, and it's going to summarize what it's done so far and restart from scratch. So that's if you're calling the API directly. What we've been doing so far in Claude Code, you can do it in API key where cost is going to rack up the same way it's doing as I'm running this through Cline. See, yeah, we can actually catch the usage from Claude Code as well. But the reality is, for Claude Code, I have a monthly subscription where there are limits, but you're not racking up costs for every message that you send. I actually never hit the limit on there.
Yep.
But frankly, also with a lot of usage with Cline, I've never really gone beyond, like, I think the biggest month that I've ever done was $75 maybe in a given month. I mean, see, this whole request only, cost 21 cents, right? Then it reviewed the Lightning Web component, created documentation.
$35.
Yeah, so I feel like you can do, as long as you're, I think when you work, I think Cline is a good tool to learn how to work with large language models, because it shows you a lot, right? It shows you the context, it shows you how much it costs. So it's a good indicator of, like, am I using it right? Because if you're always hovering over the 200K token, then that's where it's going to be expensive, because the more tokens you have, they're always going back and forth, right? On every request, it's sending back those tokens, right? So you see it's also caching some of it, but it's sending it back and forth. Thanks. But it's a good tool, I think, to get going, just because it shows you a lot of information from there. But again, so costs are very reasonable, I would say, from my point of view, for what I get in exchange. Very reasonable.
Well, and especially at least as consultants, this is something where maybe we have a line in our contract to pass the cost of this onto our client, and they will happily pay, because the alternative is for me to spend 20 hours doing something I could do in one. And it's like, well, would you rather pay, $5,000, or would you rather pay $250 plus the $2 of usage that I require to do this? So I think that's a good way for, if you're a consultant You could pass this cost along to your client in sort of like you got your hourly rate, time and materials. This is materials.
Yes, Drew, that's a good call out. Maybe that's what you don't tell them, that you use the large language model, but then you sell your work as organic and fair trade. Because you've done it and crafted documentation. I like this one. Yeah.
Like the ability for a consultant to do value-based project work increases with something like this, because as we gain that was frustrating in my early days of consulting because I work really fast. And so if I'm efficient, I'm penalized for it financially. But okay. Handcrafted documentation. Yes. Lovingly. I'll type it out manually on a typewriter just so that I can show. See. Look at the hammer
pigeon.
What's that?
We'll send it by pigeon.
Yes.
It'll get there.
All right, so we're on time. Got some great attendance, a lot of questions. Appreciate it. I hope everyone got value out of this.
Yeah, this was.
This one's going to be a hit for you, I think. JM's greatest hits.
Oh, even Chickman was there. We haven't heard from him, but even the Chickman was here. I didn't realize that. Hello,
Morning,
Chris.
all. Yes, I've been lurking in the background.
All right. Well, thanks for my crew for attending. Thanks for everyone who attended also. That's external to this. Appreciate everyone joining. Appreciate the questions. John, guess we're talking in 3 hours again? Revenue Cloud that time around. So
the big question, is Revenue Cloud ready for prime time? We're going to talk about that and more.
All right.
And make sure you subscribe to Jean-Michel's channel.
Yeah,
the Cloud
Update, the YouTube channel, if you're interested in Revenue Cloud. And now I guess AI. Maybe I'm an AI influencer now. That I should modify my LinkedIn header.
Somebody needs an Instagram account. Hashtag entrepreneur, hashtag AI all day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Appreciate
all.
it.
Thanks.
Yeah.